I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
It makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
There's insanity in the control room.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Amazing.
There's some boards in this town. Wet ass keywords.
Hey everybody, it's Friday. We got a show. It's a good show. We're actually going to have a lot of different fun stuff to talk about. So welcome to the stream. Please like and share if you haven't already. Like I said, we got some stuff to talk about. First, I want to take some time. We're going to talk about Ilhan Omar. We've got that story, which is disappointing. It's disappointing. But not at all surprising that she is being once again smeared, not just by conservatives, not by right-wingers, but also by fellow Democrats. Shocker. Then we are going to go to Pennsylvania, where there's a Democratic representative who's actually, you know what? I'm not going to spoil it too much, but it's awesome. You're going to love that video. We've got also conservative mad about critical race theory, of course. We have student loan study, which is really, really interesting. And then, of course, we're going to end the story, or I should say end the day, with a fun story about Bernie Sanders and weed. Fun stuff. If you haven't already, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Let's do it. Let's jump in. All right. Recently, Representative Ilhan Omar got in a little bit of trouble for asking some actually pretty poignant questions about war crimes. All right. Now, as you're going to see in the video, what she asked U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, she's gonna ask him if there are any mechanisms for justice of victims of war crimes that are outside the jurisdictions of the International Criminal Court. So I'm gonna show you that video, and then we're gonna break it down.
I know you opposed the court's investigation in both Palestine and in Afghanistan. I haven't seen any evidence in either cases that domestic courts both can and will prosecute alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. And I would emphasize that in Israel and Palestine, this includes crimes committed by both the Israeli security forces and Hamas. In Afghanistan, it includes crimes committed by the Afghan national government and the Taliban. So in both of these cases, if domestic courts can't or won't pursue justice, and we oppose the ICC, where do we think the victims of these supposed crimes can go for justice? In both of these cases, if domestic courts can't or won't pursue justice, and we oppose the ICC, where do we think victims are supposed to go for justice? And what justice mechanisms do you support for them?
All right, so look, that's a question. That's a good question. How anybody can go and take that and flip out, I don't know why. But again, it's a fair question. It's a good question. But apparently, it's also an uncomfortable question because it turns out that we are the ones. We are one of many state actors that have and are doing war crimes. So obviously, pretty uncomfortable for the United States, who has done war crimes. Again, and let me just point out some of them: illegal invasions, for example, Iraq, killing civilians, as evidenced by Chelsea Manning. You also have the spying on American citizens, once again revealed by Edward Snowden. You also have, reports that we use depleted uranium weapons or rounds in the Middle East. We've done regime change wars, proxy wars, and a lot of people either don't know this or they don't want to admit that sometimes we're the baddies. Our government has done things that are bad that we as people, as citizens of this country, shouldn't be proud of. So now this is important because the United States, and this goes all the way back to Bill Clinton, who decided, not to get involved, not to support the International Criminal Court, during his presidency, and we haven't supported it since. That was, of course, the creation of that. And not only that, but interestingly enough, we've actually supported, the United States has supported the actions of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, while not being a part of them. And we did up until, by the way, they started looking into war crimes in Afghanistan perpetrated by the U.S. forces, and of course, Israel and their alleged war crimes happening in the Palestinian territories. And so now I go back to the Rome Statute. And so the Rome Statute is basically where a lot of countries that signed on to legitimize the power of the International Criminal Court, that was what gave them their legitimacy to go after criminals across the globe. The U.S. and Israel have not signed that agreement, Now, of course, there are non-state actors that have signed it as well, which are, the Taliban, of course, and Hamas. So now the Taliban and Hamas, they've done horrible things too, bombing civilians, suicide bombings, human rights abuses, of course. And well, guess what? We've also done that. And the Israeli right-wing government has also done that. And so what Ilhan Omar is basically calling for is recognition that basically war crimes bad, and that victims of war crimes in places where the ICC is not recognized have to have some sort of vehicle for justice, to get justice. And right now they don't have that. And so what can we do to actually make sure that they have a vehicle to get justice if they're the victims of war crimes? Now, I think that's a totally fair question. I think it's an open question, okay? Or not an open question, but it's a totally fair question, totally honest question. And I think it opens up a good conversation. So now, unfortunately, a lot of Democratic colleagues took some umbrage with that. Now, Omar first came under fire from Democratic lawmakers on Wednesday when a dozen moderate representatives issued a statement accusing her of equating the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban. Now, again, you've seen her statement. You saw her question. Was there equivocation there? Not that I could see. And also, they accused her of displaying a deep-seated prejudice and giving cover to terrorist groups. Yikes. Later Thursday, The entire House Democratic leadership, including Nancy Pelosi, also issued a statement, quote, drawing false equivalencies between democracies like the U.S., we're a representative republic, and Israel. I don't really believe that you can be a good model for democracy if you're an apartheid state. But saying that drawing that false equivalency between those democracies and groups that engage in terrorism like Hamas and Taliban foments prejudice and undermines progress toward a future of peace and security for all. What about the peace and security for Palestinians, for the Afghan people? What about justice, more importantly? And by the way, if you actually have peace and security for Palestinian people, stopping the illegal settlements, well, guess what? That also helps guarantee the safety and security of people in Israel, since Hamas would no longer have the support or backing of many of the people in the Palestinian territories to go and fire rockets. Okay? Again, all of this is methods of last resort, and understand that terrorism generally tends to be a result of being crushed in some way, being, and I can't think of the word, oppressed in some way. People tend to lash out. That's not always the case, of course, but I think in this case, that response there by certain groups, it's not a good response. And don't get me wrong, I don't support that response. I don't support firing rockets. It's ridiculous and stupid. But I'm just saying that I can understand that that's a cause of that is that deep-seated oppression. And so there's that. Anyway, so now, again, she's not saying that America is just like Hamas. Again, all she's doing is asking for, hey, what do we do for victims of war crimes perpetrated by countries outside the ICC? And just because we're not part of the ICC doesn't mean that we should be able to get away with doing bad things like war crimes. However, apparently, accountability is a bridge too far. Party leaders added that they welcome clarification by Omar that there is no moral equivalency between the U.S. and Israel and Hamas and the Taliban. So now they asked for clarification. Here's what she said. Quote, on Monday, I asked Secretary of State Blinken about ongoing International Criminal Court investigations. To be clear, the conversation was about accountability for specific instances regarding those ICC cases, not a moral comparison between Hamas and the Taliban and the U.S. and Israel. I was in no way equating terrorist organizations with democratic countries with well-established judicial systems. True. Omar later noted that victims, quote, don't trust the well-established judicial systems of Israel and the U.S. to deliver justice. And those of you who might be wondering why. Well, here's an example. Treatment of indigenous people in this country. Not a lot of justice for them. The profile of Muslims in America following 9/11. Not really a lot of justice for them as well. Doing surveillance, following them around mosques. You can go back a lot of different examples, right? The same thing happened to the Japanese during World War II. This is our government. This is our system that allowed for those systems to happen, allowed for these atrocities. More recently, Guantanamo Bay, where there were innocent people that were held and tortured there. One example is Murat Kurnaz, who was held in extrajudicial detention by the U.S., first in Afghanistan, and then in Guantanamo Bay. And that was the beginning of December of 2001. He was, by the way, tortured in both places. By early of 2002, intelligence officials of the United States and Germany had both concluded the accusations against Kurnaz were groundless, and yet he was held there for an additional 4 years. So, yeah, that's a crime. That is a crime. And it was involved in the so-called war on terror. Now, what's interesting here is, again, I mentioned that we're not part of the ICC, but we have helped them in the past, taken action against regimes and people under investigation, by the ICC. However, again, only until they started looking at the U.S. government and the Israeli government did the ICC suddenly become a problem. And right now, the investigations here is an investigation into American military actions in Afghanistan between the years of 2003 and 2004. Dozens of people had claimed to have been tortured during interrogations by the CIA in black sites created by the Bush administration. Again, war crimes. 2 current Guantanamo detainees, Sharkawi Al-Hajj and Gula Duran, who are represented by legal counsel, have provided detailed testimony to the ICC to that effect, that they were indeed tortured. Another, again, is the ICC's investigation into possible crimes by Israel related to Jewish settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Again, that's what started the recent exchange of fire between Hamas and the IDF. Is those evictions in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. And so, look, they don't like those investigations. They're not in favor of these investigations. And look, again, right now, the U.S. government, even under Joe Biden and under, Benjamin Netanyahu and whoever's going to replace him, are both far right. And as such, we don't really like being held accountable. In fact, during the Trump administration, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had warned that the ICC would, quote, end its illegitimate probe into the U.S. or else face consequences. So that seems to be a direct threat. Sadly, again, the Biden administration is essentially doing the same thing, not really helping at all, and saying, you should probably stop investigating us and our friends in Israel. And now the Democratic Party is unfortunately targeting Ilhan Omar, which most certainly helps the right wing, also endangering Ilhan Omar's life. She already gets enough death threats as it is. In fact, Omar spokesperson Jeremy Slevin earlier on Thursday accused him of ginning up the same Islamophobic hate against her, which would be the far right. And you also had Omar that tweeted, quote, we serve in Congress with Islamophobes like Representative Mo Brooks, and Democratic colleagues will not condemn him and instead give him legitimacy to his dangerous rhetoric. And that rhetoric, of course, and I'm gonna read something that Mo Brooks had said, quote, Muslims, more so than most people, have great animosity towards Israel and the Jewish faith. As you have more and more Muslims in the U.S., as they gain greater and greater influence in elections, you're going to see more people like Ilhan Omar. So that is deeply Islamophobic. Again, there's 6 billion Muslims? They wanted us all dead. We'd kind of be dead at this point. And by the way, I love how much projection this is, because Mo Brooks and members of the far right have allied with deeply anti-Semitic people. Members of the far right are the ones who chanted, the Jews will not replace us. It's pretty ridiculous to think that those people are on the side of the Jewish people, as opposed to people who want peace in both Israel and Palestine. And look, again, there is a reason that the far right defends Israel. For one, again, the far right, what they want to do, first they want to get rid of Jewish people in America by sending them all to Israel. And other members of the far right, the evangelicals, think that once the Jews get there, then Jesus is going to kick off the end times, which is what they're all waiting for. They're all waiting for. So these are deeply anti-Semitic positions, and yet the Democrats are right now so afraid of criticizing Israel, because then they get called anti-Semitic by the right wing, that they attack Ilhan Omar and they defend the right-wing government of Israel, who's making things worse by doing illegal things and essentially operating the world's largest open-air prison. So now, she was attacked, but people did rise to her defense. The Congressional Progressive Caucus issued this statement saying that her voice is critical and necessary. Quote, we cannot ignore a right-wing media echo chamber that has deliberately and routinely attacked a black Muslim woman in Congress, distorting her views and intentions and resulting in threats against her and her staff. We urge our colleagues not to abet or amplify such divisive and bad faith tactics. More. Omar said on Wednesday, by the way, that she was once again enduring threats against her life. saying that every time I speak out on human rights, I'm inundated with death threats, which led, of course, to more progressives backing her, beginning with Cori Bush and Ayanna Pressley, who attacked the bad faith attempts, to take Omar's words out of context. She said, imagine if Congress was as outraged by what Palestinians endured daily. Representative Jamal Bowman also chimed in, urging fellow Democrats to recognize the biases that fuel personal attacks and defend our colleagues. When a woman, person of color, or Muslim speaks out against injustice, backlash ensues. When Omar speaks out, the vitriol is compounded by her being all three. True. Rashida Tlaib, the first Palestinian American woman elected to Congress, tweeted that freedom of speech doesn't exist for Muslim women in Congress. The benefit of the doubt doesn't exist for Muslim women in Congress either. House Democratic leadership should be ashamed of its relentless exclusive tone policing of Congresswomen of color. And here you have, interestingly enough, this is somebody who's not exactly known as a progressive, right, when it comes to policy positions. But Representative Betty McCollum also had an amazing statement on this. Here's what she said. When state actors, including democracies or non-state actors such as terrorist organizations, engage in acts to indiscriminately kill civilians or commit gross violations of human rights, such as torture, which we've done, indefinite detention, there should be internationally recognized mechanisms to achieve accountability and enforce agreed upon humanitarian standards. Representative Omar asked a serious question, which is her right as a member of Congress, but the hypocrites of the NRCC, that's Republicans, should be reminded of their silence when the Trump administration sat down with the Taliban to negotiate a diplomatic agreement without the Afghan government, while American service members and Afghan civilians were being attacked and killed. Anti-war activists and human rights defenders went much further than members of the U.S. government, which has killed more foreign civilians by far than any other entity of the world since waging the only nuclear war in history in 1945. Since then, millions of men, women, and children have died in U.S.-led wars, bombings, and covert actions in dozens of countries on every inhabited continent, including at least hundreds of thousands and perhaps well over 1 million during the nearly 20-year war on terror. God damn! Look, Benny McCollum, on that, based. On other things, not so much. But wow. AOC also stuck up for, of course, Ilhan Omar. And there's more. Code National Co-Director Ariel Gold said this. Actually, the U.S. has likely committed worse atrocities than the Taliban and Hamas combined. Remember the Iraq War, Abu Ghraib, referring, of course, to numerous prisons, black sites, Guantanamo Bay. Prisoners in the war on terror were tortured, sometimes to death, by U.S. military and intelligence personnel. These men and women were informed by techniques described in U.S. torture manuals used to instruct security forces from Latin American and other dictatorships that the U.S. Army schooled of the Americas and other torture training centers. By the way, in the decades since the end of World War II, the U.S. has also supported regimes that perpetrated genocidal mass murder in Indonesia, West Papua, Bangladesh, Guatemala, East Timor, Kurdistan, and Iraq, as well as Israeli ethnic cleansing, apartheid, colonization, and other crimes in Palestine, and some of the world's most brutally repressive dictatorships, terrorists, and death squads. So, yeah, it turns out we might be the baddies. People have to hear it, though. People have to understand that in our name, our government has done some really horrible things, some horrible shit, going back decades, and still to some extent doing it today. And I know this is super uncomfortable to hear, okay? I don't like being the bad guy, but we're the bad guys. And I know many of you hate this, and many of you probably think that by pointing this out, we are being un-American. We are being un-American. But no, actually, look, this may sound naive and sort of like hokey and whatever, but no, you know what? I want the promise of America. I want the America that I was sold when I was little, all right? I want the shining city. I want the freedom. I want equality and justice. I want the America that was told to us as a child. The America that everybody, that right-wingers pretend that we are, but we're not. The America that, by the way, Ilhan Omar represents. She came here as a refugee with nothing to make a better life for her and her family. She made it into Congress, and guess what? She fights for regular people, to help all people. That's the kind of America that I want to see. And maybe, of course, that's naive. Maybe it's naive for me to think it, but a better world is possible. And you know what? Even if it's not, I'm going to fight for it because I want that. I love that promise of America. And I think that we can do this. I think we can do better. And so I want to close out this segment with a clip here from the late Michael Brooks talking about Ilhan Omar and Saudi Arabia in a segment that was titled, "We Should Defend Ilhan Omar." So take a look.
Everybody needs to support her completely, fully, and unequivocally. There's no room for prevarication and bullshit. She is right on all of the merits of the policy questions. Incidentally, she has spoken out quite clearly on Saudi Arabia. That's a problematic formulation. If a Jewish congressperson criticized a dictatorship in another part of the world, I wouldn't immediately say, well, what's your position on the occupation? So that's a problem in and of itself. But that being said, I'll register that she has. And in fact, most people that are going to come into Congress and have an honest appraisal of a place like Saudi are going to be precisely the ones who are most likely to buck the consensus on a foreign policy built on Israel and Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, and ones that are going to question an ongoing commitment to both of these states with the abuses they commit. And of course, this has nothing to do with disrespecting or not caring about the safety and well-being of Israelis or Saudis for that matter. And again, look at that formulation. Nobody said in response to a tweet about Saudi Arabia, like, oh man, you're really feeding stereotypes about the Saudi monarchy. She's talking about policy issues. She's right on the merits, and the idea, the notion that she would not have a right to say these things because of who she is disgusting, racist, delusional in and of itself, and incredibly prejudiced and paranoid. So we need to have her back 100%.
100%. Okay. Moving on. That was, Jesus Christ, that was a half hour. Yeah, I can't add anything to that, so let's move on. You think that was it? We've got more. We've got so much more. All right. A Democratic representative in Pennsylvania had his mic cut because apparently he was dropping too much truth about the Republican Party and their anti-choice agenda. Take a look.
Debating a bill that will never become law. But this feels normal for far too many of us. This is just another act in a political theater that has plagued this chamber for far too long. We are a legislature that has met more to remove mask mandates, strip executive emergency powers, and overturn free and fair elections than we have to make strategic investments in Pennsylvania's women, children, and families. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, it is not lost on me, and I'm sure it's not lost on many of the members here today, that this legislation is just one more unnecessary overreach in a grossly, predictably misogynistic agenda. An agenda pursued by by a party that is 100% white in a chamber that is 70% male.
100% white, 70% male. And here they are trying to make decisions, for women. Yeah. Now, look, the bill that they're debating right now, by the way, as he points out, is legislation that would require women to treat miscarriages like the death of a human being, which would force them to bury or cremate the fetal remains. This is insane. I mean, again, It's amazing that we're even talking about this, okay? But let me give you some facts. About 10 to 20% of known pregnancies actually end in miscarriages. Now, that's already a lot. So for every one of those, under this bill, in Pennsylvania, you would have to bury or cremate the remains and hold a little funeral. And it wouldn't be your choice, by the way, because miscarriage is already horrible enough as it is, right? And it does happen 10 to 20% of the time, just as a natural bodily process. But then you have the situation where the state is forcing you to do it, literally forcing you to do this. And so, wow. But it's not just, there's more to it. It's not just 10 to 20%. That's what we know of. It actually happens a lot more, because miscarriages happen every time a fertilized egg refused to implant, meaning that most of miscarriages happen before you even know you're pregnant. That means on average, women actually have more miscarriages than live births throughout their entire lives. And so if you make them hold a funeral, even the ones that they know about, it's, again, both horrifying and unnecessary. This is like Handmaid's Tale kind of shit. Okay? It's really messed up stuff, super divorced from actual scientific reality. So now, his colleagues didn't like being called out about this. So they booed, and I want to show you his reaction, because it sounds like something that I would say.
Oh, your boos mean nothing.
Speaker, that's enough.
Your boos mean nothing to me. I've seen who you cheer for.
The gentleman will suspend. Mr. Speaker. For what purpose does the majority leader rise? I believe these comments are inflammatory to our members and to this esteemed chamber. We have tried to give latitude on this issue, both yesterday and today, but I will not have our members impugned or insulted or this kind of behavior on this floor.
Are you not 100% white?
Gentleman is out of order.
100% white, 70% male.
Mr. Speaker. Turn off his mic. Those should be stricken from the record.
Cancel culture. I love it. And by the way, he did the Rick and Morty meme. That's great. Your boos mean nothing. Your boos mean nothing. I've seen what you cheer for. Right there. Something I'd say. Okay, so overall, though, these are ghoulish bills. Super. Why, again, are they trying to get the state to force women to bury a miscarriage? That is beyond fucked. And it's from people who obviously don't have any idea how the human body, the female body, works. I mean, why don't we just pass a law, if you're so worried about it, that you would have to have a funeral for your sperm every time you jerk off or have a wet dream? Every sperm is sacred. I mean, it's life. It's life. Of course, there's potential for life that you have just wasted. I wonder what the difference is here between this and that is. Oh, wait, we know. It's just another way for Republican men to control and, more importantly, criminalize women's bodies. At the end of the day, that is all it is about. It has always been about. Not pro-life, pro-control. All right. A conservative activist was pretty upset over the idea of teaching critical race theory and ended up actually being arrested for trespassing at a school board meeting in order to try to disrupt it or, you know, do some commentary about how critical race theory bad. In fact, let me give you the details about this. A member of a right-wing Arizona group that has previously protested COVID-19 closures and school equity programs was arrested on Wednesday outside the Chandler School board meeting after a disturbance. Steve Daniels, the chair of the Patriot Party of Arizona, was arrested on suspicion of criminal trespassing after a school representative and police officers asked him to leave and he had refused. Well, it sounds like a typical story of F around and find out. During the confrontation, Daniels and an unnamed woman became upset after not being allowed into the meeting, claiming free speech. Oh, my free speech is being violated. This is supposed to be an open meeting. You have broken the law by not letting me into the meeting. No, okay. In fact, here's what he said. Let me get to this quote in a second, actually. 2 officers are heard in a video that was taken by Daniels that they can live stream the meeting, and that one officer tells a woman when she says, "I don't have a phone to watch, go get a phone then." All right, sure. In response, Daniels told the police officers, quote, "You're tyrannical police officers that don't know the law, that they're protecting the tyrannical government." And then compared police to Nazis. Okay, buddy. All right. Calm down. There's a reason that they're not letting people in. And I actually agree with them on this. We're still in a pandemic. So apparently the school district has had a limited in-person attendance at board meetings since last June because of COVID-19. Meetings are streamed online, so technically, yes, you can still watch a meeting. So you can see what's going on. There is transparency. It is being live streamed. And even so, you can still get into the meeting if you it's at a first come, first served basis. In fact, capacity is capped at 30 people, and seats fill up on a first come, first served basis. As I said, people can wait in the lobby where the meeting is being broadcast or outside until they're called. So technically, it is still an open meeting, which you can watch, and you can even attend in person if you're fast enough. And turns out you weren't. Mr. Daniels, you were too slow. Sad day for you. Refusing to bend the rules for your dumb ass doesn't make the government tyrannical. Okay? These people, understand, these people are wanting special treatment. Special rules for them that apply to them because they think that they're entitled to special rules. Okay? And that's the problem. Now, the irony about this whole thing is, again, he's there because he's mad about critical race theory. Critical race theory is not being taught at that school, nor was it even on the docket. In fact, in an announcement near the start of the meeting, Board President Barb Mostyn said the district is not teaching critical race theory, and neither the board nor the administration has discussed implementing critical race theory in the curriculum. Her statement was included in the board agenda that was posted online. So again, he's there to complaining about something they're not even going to talk about. In fact, Mostyn said this: critical race theory has not been on our agenda, and it's not on our agenda this evening. If you have concerns about classroom instruction, we encourage you to let our schools or district office know so that we can look into the matter. But this guy shows up late to argue about something they're not doing, throws a fit when they won't let him in because he, again, showed up late, couldn't grab an open seat. And of course, the reason that they don't have that many open seats is because, once again, you have a pandemic. He then argues with the cops, refuses to leave, gets arrested, and then claims it was his rights that were violated. Come on. Come on. Really? He's the victim in this situation? Okay, let's ask a couple of questions here. Did the cops beat him up? Nope. Did they inject him with ketamine, as we've seen in many different places, to, calm them down, right? Nope. Did they shoot him? No. Now, if it were someone black, well, then maybe, it would have went a little bit differently, possibly. But no, what they did is they gave him ample warnings, numerous chances to watch the live stream of this happening. Perhaps if he had been patient, he could have actually spoke. And what they did is, when he wouldn't listen, when he got obstinate, they still handled him with kids' gloves and said, sorry, you got to go. Now, interestingly enough, going back to the example of if it were a black person, that's kind of why we need to talk about critical race theory. That's why it matters. In fact, critical race theory is basically there to highlight how historical inequities and racism continue to shape public policy and social conditions, which it's true. I know a lot of conservatives do not believe in this. Do not believe, oh no, we don't have any racism. What are you talking about? We had a black president once. Yeah, that you called illegitimate because he was black. Ridiculous, right? But look, talking about this stuff is totally fine with me. Our country, yes, once enslaved an entire group of people and built systems into the government to perpetuate that system. Now, once slavery was abolished, other systems took their place to ensure that the freed slaves had a harder time voting, doing economic stuff, flourishing. You had segregation, Jim Crow. You had the police were actually started as slave patrols and, had evolved to uphold white supremacy, practices of redlining, segregating communities between white and black, practices, again, which, by the way, it really denied the segregating these communities. The way that they did allowed money to flow to white communities, which flourished, had better education because of the way property taxes are funded, and black communities, which languished and had worse education and worse outcomes. And so all that stuff is stuff that we are still dealing with today. Understand that you can't undo all of that in the amount of time that we have had since the civil rights era. Okay, it's been a long, long time, but not long enough. People are still alive that marched for civil rights and that were beaten, by the way, during those marches. And while there has been some progress, this still has not been fixed. And I realize this is a very uncomfortable conversation for certain white people. We grew up, by the way, having no idea that these systems were set up necessarily, not for our benefit, but certainly for the benefit of some. Many wealthy white Southern landowners, capitalists, and politicians. They benefit the most from these systems of oppression that are still in place. White privilege, by the way, which, again, you may have a bad definition of white privilege. That doesn't mean that we all grow up as white people and we have millionaires and we have no problems. Doesn't mean that white people don't have it bad or can't lose jobs or go broke or become homeless or that we have no problems at all. It just means that we do have problems. It's just the color of our skin isn't one of those problems. It's not an additional problem added on. All critical race theory does is explain how those systems still survive, thrive, and impact people of color today. And I, for one, like knowing about this stuff because I think that the more we know about it, the more that we can fix it. I actually don't think that it's a slight. I don't feel personal guilt for benefiting from these systems. It's not my fault that I grew up in this system, but now that I know, I can help fix that system. I can stop the perpetuation of this system to the next generations. And I suspect that is the thing that opponents of critical race theory don't like. They think that, no. Once people know, well, they're going to have to solve the problem. Well, now we're on the hook. Now we have to solve this problem. Better to leave everyone in ignorance so that we don't solve the problem because they think that the system as it is working exactly the way that it should. They do not want to change. And so you keep people in the dark. You keep people ignorant of the history and the struggles of people. And therefore, they don't have to do anything. Ironically, they are the ones that are trying to erase history, to cover it up, and to cancel anyone and anything that is actually trying to inform people the truth so that we can actually do something better for all people in this country. Talk about actual cancel culture. All right. Learning about systemic racism through history does not make us all individually guilty of it. I hate all the pretending that some people desperately cling to. Exactly. That was my point. Totally my point. 100%. John McCain was technically born in Panama. Panama. Is that a song? Now I think. Oh, Jesus. Now I've got that in my head, don't I? And if it's not a song, then what the hell am I thinking of? My brain is weird. Let's move on, shall we? Panama. God damn it. All right. Anyway, let's move on. It is a song. Okay. Oh, thank God I'm not going crazy. Let's go to student loans. A new study by the Roosevelt Institute has found that canceling $50,000 of student loans would be a good thing. It would actually help low-income Americans far more than it would help wealthy Americans. Now, why do I say that? Well, there's a consistent, persistent narrative going around that if you cancel $50,000 or above in student loans, that the benefit is primarily going to go to wealthy people and therefore bad. Okay. Now, this study was actually in direct response to that. President Joe Biden, for example, went on the record of not supporting $50,000 in student loan cancellation, saying that, it's going to give rich people a handout, and we should only do $10,000. And by the way, they're not doing $10,000 either. Sad. But anyway, let's get to the actual study here. Now, Roosevelt Institute researchers actually estimated that canceling $50,000 in student debt would actually provide a total of $562 in benefits for the top 10% of American households. So there's your top 10%. There's your primarily wealthy people. $562 in benefits. However, the bottom 10% would see an average of $14,991 in benefits if they were to cancel $50,000 of student loans. That's pretty good. Great, actually. They go on to explain that the primary reason for the massive gap in average benefit is that the lower income borrowers, and particularly Black borrowers, tend to take on more debt to fund their higher educations. Black borrowers are actually more likely to attend a predatory for-profit school and are less likely to graduate and are more likely to default on their debt. And although higher income households generally hold more outstanding student loan debt, the researchers noted that the burden of debt is more pronounced for lower income households since, quote, each dollar of debt is actually more substantial barrier to economic security, access to consumer credit, and increases in net worth. Contrary to common misperceptions, careful analysis of household wealth data shows that student loan debt cancellation would provide more benefits to those with fewer economic resources and could play a critical role in addressing the racial wealth gap and building the Black middle class. Well, there it is. Good. If you look at all this, it makes a ton of sense. Now, I've been somebody who's on the side of let's cancel all the debt. Let's get rid of all of it. That gets a lot of opposition. And I understand a lot of it comes from the right wing. But what I don't understand is Democrats that are also against this. And now, most of them, to be fair, have settled on $50,000, and it would help a lot of people. And as you can see, this study focuses on $50,000, and I'd like to see a more comprehensive study on canceling all of it. And I'm sure that there's something out there. But now, Laura Hamilton, one of the co-authors of the study, told Yahoo Finance, quote, "We made a policy mistake in terms of placing the funding of higher education on families, and it created a lot of inequities. Big surprise. We've created this massive generational problem, and we need to fix that." And by the way, the ones who are most against canceling of student loan debt in any amount are the ones that didn't have that generational problem. They were the ones that grew up with one GI Bill, two colleges that were mostly still funded by the state and therefore had either free tuition or very, very small tuition amounts. They didn't have to deal with this problem. And so yet they are the ones that are saying, well, you can deal with this problem and you should deal with this problem. Well, no, you didn't have the problem. You settled it onto us when you decided to defund these schools to give tax cuts to corporations and the rich. So, again, this is, again, one of the ways, again, that I would do this. I would cancel it all. Make public colleges and universities tuition free. That is the best policy. The best policy. And for those who are concerned about giving money or benefit to the rich, well, for one, guess what? We could get that money back through taxation. It's a novel concept, I know. Yes, let them go to school for free if they want. And then tax them more. This isn't complicated. And by the way, let's note that rich people generally don't have to take out loans for school. Generally. Again, if you're talking really wealthy, talking upper middle class, and maybe some of them might have to take up small loans, but generally not. And generally, most wealthy people do not go to public colleges and universities either. If they did, though, who cares? Go for free. Yes, because again, they're eventually going to fund it through taxes, so that they might actually end up paying more back into the system, and that's good. That's how this works. And by the way, the added benefit of this is, guess what? Somebody else who is poor gets to go without debt. They get a good education, and maybe they'll become successful. And maybe then they'll pay into the next generation of people. And so it becomes a virtuous cycle. It's all good. Unfortunately, there are people that believe, no, that's not good. Some think that since they had to pay outrageously for student loans, that everyone should. I suffered, so should you. Well, I don't agree with that. Now, Biden's argument, again, no, not even Biden's argument. Most of the Democrats' argument, 50,000, is the one that the study looked at the most. Biden, again, is going for 10,000 and will likely not even do that. And I'll explain that later. But here's what Hamilton said. The frustration was sort of coming out of the media narrative that had coalesced a mesh of what we call the myth of student loan cancellation regressivity. The data were being used in ways that we thought was problematic. The Roosevelt Institute's authors stressed cancellation's effect on entire demographic populations while focusing on the distribution of debt by wealth, as opposed to income, and highlighting the value of erased debt to any given borrower. So they did this comprehensive study and looked at all those different factors that other studies have not. And said, according to the report, student loan debt cancellation represents a progressive wealth transfer at all proposed levels of cancellation. In fact, a more substantial plan is the more progressive option compared to the 10,000 Biden plan. A 50,000 student debt cancellation approach grants almost no additional transfer to people in the top asset decile and just over an additional $1,000 on average to 80th and 90th decile households. Meanwhile, it would grant over $4,000 to people in the 20th to 40th percentiles. This is roughly a threefold increase over the transfer to that group under the Biden plan. Hamilton stressed that the need to mitigate racial inequities is particularly important, saying, quote, cancellation is important for the building of the black middle class, considering that we've had historic policies about housing, about education, etc., that their families have not been able to enjoy throughout most of the past 100 to 150 years. And those policies have left them without family wealth, so you could think of this in the vein of reparation. Well, there you go. To me, there's no reason not to do this. And again, not to go further and cancel all the debt. But unfortunately, look, so Biden's having a lot of different fights in the Senate with Senate Republicans, okay? Unlike those other fights, Biden could do this today. He could cancel all student debt. He could cancel 50,000. He could cancel 10,000. He could do, again, he's got the power to do this unilaterally. But he's not doing it. He's not even going for $10,000. He's not fighting for this. And it really does kind of tell you the fact that he is not fighting for this. Again, bipartisanship. Republicans don't want to cancel student debt at all. Their policy is, no, let's not do anything. Let's just let people refinance or do something ridiculous like that. We'll kind of lower the interest rates just a little bit. No, that's not good enough. Not good enough at all. We have a debt problem, and we've got to get rid of it. And Biden's the one who can do something about it and continues to refuse to do that. And it really does really tell you about what his actual priorities are. One more story for y'all. This isn't about bipartisanship. It's about they don't want to. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm telling you. He doesn't want to do it. I think I made that kind of clear. Anyway, yeah, Biden's terrible. We know. We know. Moving on. One more story for you. We're going to lighten it up. We're going to have some fun. Before I do that, Grandy Dragon, thank you for the 100 bits. Ravaging Wolverine, thank you for the subscription with Prime. Appreciate that. Let's see. I had enough of Biden. I just voted to get Trump out. Where's Bernie? Gabby Mathis. Yeah, right? That would be fantastic. All right. One more story. Where is Bernie? Apparently he's having a little fun with pot. All right. It's a clip that has gone viral on the internet involving Senator Bernie Sanders having a bit of a lighthearted exchange with a Politico reporter. Take a listen.
Senator Sanders, Natalie Furtick with Politico. I'm the cannabis reporter. There's been
You are the
cannabis reporter.
Are you stoned now?
I'm not stoned right now, but I will ask you a question.
Is that a requirement to be?
It's actually not.
Okay, just wanted to check it out.
I know it's a good question.
That's a good question. Look, that's kind of adorable when you think about it, because believe it or not, that's Bernie Sanders' sense of humor. It's super dry. It's like a desert. It's definitely there, though. He's sassy grandpa. Who doesn't love sassy grandpa? A lot of people, apparently. But hey, honestly, I had no idea Politico had a cannabis reporter. That's good. And by the way, she's actually doing some pretty good work. This is Natalie Furtick. And she recently talked about how the Mormon church is actually pushing for medical cannabis in red states. I think that's fantastic. I also think that Senator Sanders, had he become president, he would have decriminalized or legalized marijuana day one. So that would be great. Joe Biden, where are you? Why are you not doing that? Oh, right. Yeah. Favor of the drug war. I know. Look, I was hoping to not go super political in this. So let's go back to Sassy Grandpa. All right. So some of the responses, kind of fun. There were memes. I want to show you one of these memes. Take a look. I'm once again asking if you are stoned right now. Fun times. Very fun. And Bernie, when he learns cannabis reporter has no weed. Come on, it's fun. Who doesn't love sassy Bernie? Again, nothing stupid, nothing political. Just an older man, very dry sense of humor, having some fun, and I appreciate that. Good stuff. Light note. Hopefully that's good to touch y'all over for the weekend. Hopefully, again, you all have a good weekend. Relax, rest up. We'll have a whole new week of disastrous news as always. So before we do that, please like and share the stream and try to enjoy yourselves this weekend. All right. Love you all. Thank you. Let me figure out who to raid into on Twitch for my Twitch audience here. We've got a few. Let's go visit some of our favorite anarchists and communists. in the Intifada. We'll do that. And for the rest of you, we will see you all later. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you tomorrow. Monday.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry.
Wait. You're getting nervous, man. Amazing.
Big, massive dump.
Who's got a hammer?
How you like that, boy? You idiot.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.